My name is Marcella Benson-Quaziena. Let me just put that out on the table.
Right.
And, I was introduced to NTL by a faculty member at the University of Washington. His name was Hy Resnick. And you know Hy Resnick?
I know the name for sure. I'm sure I've met him. Yeah.
Oh, okay. He's no longer with us, but he was he actually introduced me to the whole field of OD. And so, and I was very curious because it was through the School of Social Work. And so I was in the clinical track, and I was very interested in learning more about what it is that he does. And he did a lot of work with groups, and I loved the group work that he did. And he sent me to a HI lab in California. And I went through that lab, and some incredible things happened in that lab. And I remember being in a small group, and we got partnered up, and I was having this conversation with this young man, and we were holding hands for some reason as we talked. And it was the first time that I have very small hands, and so I was holding hands with him. And he would not let me hold his hand, and I wondered why. And I said, I'm interested in holding your hands because your hands are as small as mine. And so we had this whole conversation, and all of a sudden, all these light bulbs went out for both of us about what we do and how we are in the world, and how we use our hands in the world and don't use our hands because of their size and the comments we get from them and things like that.
Oh my.
It was. Yes, and it was just an amazing aha for both of us.
Wow.
And the other thing that happened was the next day, his wife flew in and gave me a hug, because I guess that was something that was happening inside of their system. And she said no one has ever had that conversation with him like that, and it was just pivotal for him. And so and I got to see the power of the HI lab as everybody got some ahas in their lives. And I thought, how do I get connected to this? And so after that, I actually, because I was in clinical social work, I didn't have the OD background. So I did some classes with NTL, the OD track classes.
Okay.
And got really interested in it, and decided that instead of continuing with the certificate program, I would do my PhD in the field, and I went to fielding. And so when I got there, everybody I met was an NTL member. Kathy, Susan Tara, Argentine Craig, Charlie Seashore. I mean, I could not bump into an NTL member. It was just amazing. And so and they were everywhere. They're coming out of the woodwork. And one of the things that happens in my life is that when something like that happens, it's the same thing happened with when I decided to go to fielding, was that all of a sudden I was looking at fielding, and everybody I bumped into heard of fielding. I had gone to fielding and known someone who had gone to fielding and said, oh, that's an incredible school. You should go to it. But the same thing started happening with NTL. And those are signs for me in my life when I put something out in the universe, and all of a sudden, everybody I meet or everybody I interact with all of a sudden has some kind of connection with it. And so I decided to look into it. And I believe Kathy sponsored me, she and John Carter. And so I just got involved through that, because I had all these connections and saw the work that people who were a part of NTL did in the world. So, and so it was that kind of attraction. And the conversations with NTL members were quite different about understanding systems, understanding groups, understanding the work in the world in relationship to social justice. And that was what I wanted to engage in.
Oh, that's great. And so when did you actually become a member?
I was avoiding that question because I don't actually know. I don't actually know the date.
But I love the history of what got you.
Yeah.
But
I know in the 80s, it was like 86 when I went to the first HI lab. And I think it was in the 90s that I did some the early 90s when I did some of the OD. It was right after the 86 piece. And I think I didn't join until about 2000, maybe.
Okay. Okay. About 2000. That's great. But you'd had a lot of exposure.
Right.
Go through, and of course with Fielding and Kathy and all the people you're talking about. And of course, John Carter's been big, and Kathy as well. And, especially in this AI approach to OD.
Right,
so,
right.
What would you say you do now? What would you call your role or your profession now?
I would say it is both teaching, being a scholar practitioner, kind of like.
Okay.
I teach. I used to direct the master's program of organizational development and leadership at Fielding. I teach also at a place called the Evergreen State College, and what I teach is leadership development, group dynamics, use of self, authentic self, use of self as an instrument for change. So I teach courses and they embody the legacy, all the knowledge that I have from OD, because I think. And my clinical work, because I think they all cross paths. And I think leaders in the world who understand systems, understand groups, understand individual development and things like that are better leaders in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What was the first organization you mentioned? You're doing a lot of things, a lot of places.
Evergreen State College, Fielding, and I also run a couple of the Gestalt programs in the Gestalt Center of Cleveland.
Wow.
Yeah, with John Carter. Yeah. So, and we're doing a big piece in China right now. So
that's great. Okay. Well, really vast kind of background, so that's great to hear. Here are some of these questions that if you want to answer, great, and if you don't, no big deal. What would you consider your gender to be?
What would I consider my gender to be?
Yeah.
I consider my gender to be female, and I do embrace the gender fluidity in the world. So I just want to put that out, but I stand on the side of cisgender, cis female.
Okay, that's great. And race?
African American.
Okay. And this is sometimes different for other people. Ethnicity.
So this is how I identify myself in the world. And we can move away from the identity questions, because they seem to be one-word questions. So I consider myself an unapologetic African American lesbian who's in her 60s, who is loud and proud.
Okay. Well, no wonder you and Kathy get along so well. Because if there was anybody else that fits that description that I know, you got it. Except for a piece of the thing. Okay.
Right.
I'm writing this down. And age?
In my 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Knocking on the door of 70. Loudly.
Yeah. Well, I turned 75 this year, and it's like, when did that happen?
Oh yeah, exactly.
That's great. Well, so this is great. You've already given me a lot of information about, and especially that sounds like that initial high point conversation about your hands with the guy in the very first HI, and that sounds like that stayed with you through all the rest of these years of experience in the field.
Exactly.
So what I'd love to have you do is recall a time, some other time, when you really felt most excited about your work and membership in NTL. What was your very best experience when you felt most connected, most involved, most excited about your learning and your
So I was fortunate enough to be on the first faculty of the DCPC, the Diversity Certificate. Diversity Certificate Program at NTL. That was a huge cohort that went through, I think it was 7 sessions And it really brought in the use of self. It looked at globalization. It looked at all these issues around how we influence systems, how we impact the world around what the diversity, inclusion, and equity. And it was a wonderful, wonderful program. And we had some incredible students, and the faculty that came together for that was just amazing.
Who were some of those people?
So Delight was one of them. And I had just met Delight, and she comes in with her red hair, and her name is Delight, and she was a delight. So,
yes. For sure.
Right. And so, Carol Brantley was another faculty member.
Yeah.
She was just dynamo.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I love about NTL is the intellectual curiosity, the intellectual engagement, the challenge of thought in a caring way, that we really come together and really chew on some material and issues that are going on in the world, and really think about how do we embody them and how do we then impact them as we move forward. And I mean, I think it's one of the cornerstones of NTL. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to join NTL was because of their mission. I mean, it's very few organizations have had at that point social justice as a core element of who they are in the world. And NTL had that. And so searching for organizations that I could hang my hat on and understand, because one of the things I always say is that I believe in the art of the possible, because with this diversity, inclusion stuff, I think if you don't believe in the art of the possible, you can't do the work. And so I embody that in the work that I do, in the exchanges that I make as I go into organizations and doing inclusion work and things like that. So, and to be a part of a learning organization, a learning community where people are grappling with the issues that are going on and learning from each other and impacting each other is just phenomenal.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. So in terms of telling a story about that, I'm really getting, as one example, this first diversity certificate program that you were a part of designing and facilitating then. And the other piece I'm hearing in there was the willingness to really grapple with those ideas, to really put in some using the intellectual curiosity and thought to dive deep in. I think your words were chew on those issues, with the outcome being, how did you want to engage with the world, and what do you want to do about that? So the intellectual part and engagement, and then moving to choice of action.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
And those learnings come in small doses and large doses at times, and they show up in everything you do, because once you have digested it, once you have decided, okay, I'm going to move through the world with this, it's amazing how it just pops up in every system that you're in, that you then have the wherewithal, the understanding of the dynamics that are going on, so that you can assist in a whole different way.
And hopefully, create less resistance, more.
Resistance is resistance. I actually learn from the resistance that I get. I try to understand the resistance more than I try to douse it out. What is this resistance saying to us about the change we want to make? How do we then look at the resistance and hold that as true, as a part of the reality? And how do we then take that and move forward with it?
That's great. So another form of inclusion, really.
Exactly.
Broadening the thought. So what would you say, just thinking back on that first experience, what in particular did you contribute to the creation and the running of that certificate program?
Actually, I see myself as one of my couple of my cornerstones, I believe for myself, is use of self. And how do you use yourself as an instrument for change? And so how to really having folks understand that concept and that understanding, and how do you do it in the moment? I mean, for example, sometimes, I used to have PhD, when we were all doing checks, I used to have PhD on my check. And I would go to the grocery store and I would write a check, and there would be a woman of color who was a cashier, and she would say something like, oh, you have a PhD. She goes, I've never met an African-American woman with a PhD. And how do I then engage that woman about what it is that she wants to do in the world and possibilities? And so just using yourself every day in situations like that. Some things are granted, but some things are just very, very grains of sand. And how do we use that spectrum as we begin to say, how do we create change? Because it's the spectrum that we have to pay attention to.
Oh, that's a great example too. Yeah, little and big. Was there any part of that that particularly stands out in terms of not only the individual learning, of the participants in that program, but the power of that because it was taking place in a group?
Oh, there was, there was a lot that was the group dynamic. That's the other, I said a couple of cornerstones. The other cornerstone I have is group dynamics. I absolutely adore and love group dynamics. I actually often find myself at the boundary because I'm of the group, because one of the things I'm doing is trying to pay attention to all the things that are going on. And I think change happens at the boundary. So I find myself at the boundary, and some of the shifts in the learning process, some of the shifts among faculty first, because one of the things that we did was every single concept we talked about, we did it as a faculty first, so that we had grounding as we spoke with the participants. And some of those conversations with the faculty, we would be in each other's face and each other's, ideas, and say, well, why are you going there with that idea? And we would just challenge our thought processes in a way that I think there has to be an element of trust and camaraderie in order to do that with a group of faculty. And so we had some really deep, dynamic conversations. And then with that, I think when you do that as a faculty, it allows that to happen with the participants. And so we would be doing quadrant theory, and that's, quadrant behavior theory is some of the hardest, when you're talking across the quadrant, that's some of the most difficult conversations I think we had during that time. And to really hear from those quadrants of white men, white women, women of color, and men of color, some of those, and how do you come to meet in the center to have those conversations? Those were just powerful conversations.
Oh, I'll bet. Exciting. It's reminding me of similar experiences. This is great. So let's move on then to the next part, what is coming, which is the values piece. And, specifically the things that you really, again, I've heard a lot about this already, but let me just zero in on specific things you value about your work, about the learning community, NTL, and yourself. So I'll separate the value about the work.
So, one of the things that, one of the things I think I value about myself, and this comes from my Gestalt learning, is that I believe every system is doing the best that it can at any given time. And I think what that allows is, it allows an openness and a space of maneuvering inside of that system that no matter what emerges, you're ready to engage it. And so that's one of the foundational pieces I think I bring to the system. But one of the things I love about NTL is the willingness and the understanding of engagement, and the understanding of community and how to build community and how to live inside of community. It doesn't mean that we're all holding hands, singing kumbaya all the time. It means sometimes we're like, what's up with that, and things like that. And so it's how do you, and I think you have to have conditions inside of a community in order to learn and grow together. And some of those things is trust, honesty, and really believing in empowering everybody that's there, and the inclusion piece. And so hearing the multiple voices. And so I think that is some of the pieces that the conditions that NTL helps set up with the when we're talking about being a learning community.
Yeah, that is right on. Well, and so let me ask if there's anything different that comes to mind when you think specifically of what you value about your work. Is there anything in addition to what you've said you value about NTL and yourself?
So the main thing I value about my work is if it's not fun, I'm not doing it.
Okay, I'm writing that down.
I think fun has to be a part of every single equation. Yeah. Life has to be fun. I love, it's like, what's your joy? My joy is engagement and stuff like that, but I gotta have fun in it. And, and I have to say, when we're having these critical conversations, I'm having fun too. So, so I think we can't take ourselves too serious. I think we have to understand human dynamics and understand that with that comes joy, and how do we tap into that joy and have fun with each other. I mean, one of the things about NTL is that, NTL loves to party. So all this work goes on, and then there's a big party at the end. I mean, at the end of this DCPC program, we were in Brazil, and Brazilians came in, and we all danced and sang together, and it was just a highlight.
Yeah. Oh, that just makes me relive all those kinds of experiences as well. That is fantastic. Okay, so within all of that, what do you see? And again, you've given me a number of good ideas on that. If you were going to say this is the core value within NTL, from all these experiences, what stands out for you about how NTL has really lived its mission and vision? If you were going to pick maybe one thing, what would that be? Core value.
Let me see. I would say that a core value is inclusion.
Yep.
And I would say a core value is understanding change and working with change, and really holding change, the possibility of change and the possibility of moving through rough patches to get to the desired outcome is a huge piece of knowing what to do and how to do it. And so holding that change process is a valuable process.
Great. Just writing here. It's funny doing these. I'm reminded of how tough it is to hold the discipline of not engaging in the conversation right now. And I do sense, so I'm trying to put a cork in it on my side. But a lot of things for me. Okay, so as we are facing the future, what are one or two wishes that you have for NTL community to contribute to our preferred and successful future?
Mhm.
Wish-
So I think that one of the things that we have to do is, I think one of the things that we've done over the years is we have changed and grown. I mean, who thought at this point in our life we would be doing conferences virtually and things like that, and we would have the capacity to do some of that stuff. But I also think that we are in this time of that we are being challenged. Many organizations that is as old as we are buckling down in some ways, and we're losing some of them. And so how do we hold on to what it is we know how to do and how to do well, and continue to move forward? And so I think we've been at these points at several times in our history, and we've had shepherds. And I don't know who our shepherds are right now. I mean, Charlie and Edie Seashore were huge shepherds, and we lost them. We lost a key shepherd. And so there would be something happening, and we would think something was going on, and they would just shepherd us on the track and in the right direction. And so we're in that phase right now. And so who are our shepherds, and how do we allow our shepherds to guide us as we move forward? And how do we then understand the change process, so that we are seeing, we're using field theory. And I think, I mean, we got chaos going, but we also need to remember that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But in doing that, we have to attend to the parts as we hold the whole. And so we can't sacrifice the parts for the whole, or the whole for the parts. So how do we move forward, understanding that, holding that, and bringing that together in a way that keeps us viable in the future?
Okay. Very good point. Okay. Well, that's lots. That's really great. What else comes to mind that we ought to capture in this interview about, NTL and its future?
So I've been doing a number of these interviews, and one of the things that as I interview folks, I mean, the wisdom in our system. How do we tap into our wisdom, honor that wisdom, and use that wisdom to move forward? I think we've gotten to a point where that's so-and-so's wisdom, but how do we tap into our collective wisdom? We are, I mean, the knowledge in this organization can either hinder us or propel us forward. And I think we're nuts if we don't use it to propel us forward, because there are some brilliant people in this system.
That's great. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to hearing. I mean, we'll be synthesizing all of this as best we can to that, to the jamboree.
Yes. And that's what I'm on that committee, the Jamboree Committee. And let me tell you, it has been a great committee. It's an international committee. It's Meadows on it, Pat's on it. There's just a lot of people. Peter's on it, Peter Nolan, Kathy's chairing, Peter and Kathy are chairing it. And it is just, we meet at my time, 7:30 in the morning. And they get me to a meeting at 7:30 in the morning. That's good.
Great. Well,
and we have fun. So it's a great committee to and everybody just has NTL in their hearts. So and so that the work that we're doing, it's hard work. It's hard work.